Hello everybody, this is Noah Frere, your astronomologer. We're going to talk a little bit about mid-May 2022, starting with the Mercury Retrograde, which happened this morning on the East Coast. I do have a story. I have two stories for this Mercury Retrograde, actually. It starts with the previous retrograde when I took a plane to California, drove down to Mexico, and got my 4 wisdom teeth removed, which was a very intense experience. However, it went very well. Almost all of that went flawlessly, and my mouth healed very well also, which strengthens my conviction that you can do whatever you want during a Mercury retrograde. I will note that Mercury was exactly on that day trining my personal Saturn, which represents bones and teeth. So I had kind of a bit of good luck there. I did not plan my dental work to be done during that day for that reason. This morning was a little different. I took my daughter to the dentist right after Mercury started going backwards in the sky today in Gemini, and she had a difficult experience. There was some moaning and a lot of tension, and I had to hold both hands and reassure her and offer her ice cream later, just to get through it. Even though she'd had this same work done twice before in 2 different corners of her mouth. So, that always makes me wonder. But I will say that you should still do whatever you want during a Mercury retrograde. Unless maybe your chart is different than mine. I mean, I was born under a Mercury retrograde, so it feels like a very natural situation to me. That might not necessarily be true for you. So there was a Mercury retrograde in Gemini, which, if you want one word to sum up Mercury retrograde in Gemini, I would say to rethink your life. It was about a year ago. The difference between that one and this one is last year, the whole retrograde happened for about 3 weeks in the sign of Gemini. This year, it's actually changing signs. It will backward into Taurus. And that gives a very different energy. It's a more inward energy. Retrograde is already inward facing, but in Taurus it's even more inner. And it's more quiet. In Gemini, it can be loud. It's very bright, it's very curious, very active, and there's something outward oriented about Gemini. So in Taurus, we get to take it down a notch and try to see how we can solidify some of these things we're rethinking. Doesn't mean that it's time to act on all of those things, but maybe it's a good time to solidify our understanding a little deeper. Now, the Mercury actually goes into Taurus the day after it meets with the Sun. So during every Mercury retrograde, the Sun and Mercury pass each other, and this is my favorite time to meditate, one of them, during that moment, because I think of that conjunction as being the distillation of your awareness of your consciousness. So to expand upon that, the difference between awareness and consciousness, as I use the terms usually, consciousness is this base state of existence, which is just the nature of existence and God herself. It's the very nature of our soul is consciousness. But it doesn't necessarily have a lot of objects inherent in it, other than maybe some self-reflection. Awareness, on the other hand, is how we interact with our consciousness on a regular basis. So that can flit around from this mood to that mood in terms of our awareness. Not so much emotional changes, but like how we are aware of our own consciousness is always changing, which is, of course, accompanied by different moods and feelings. But when we distill our awareness into the very fundamental nature of our consciousness, then we are closer to our true selves, closer to our divine mind. And Gemini is very mental, so that's supportive of that idea. But it does have a style. So just because your awareness is very, just because you're getting very close to your true consciousness doesn't mean that it's without some kind of style of understanding. and it will be a Gemini style. So again, curious, youthful, bright, enthusiastic, very hungry for information. So once it goes into Taurus, we can bring it down a notch and make it a little bit more grounded. So when Mercury goes into Taurus, it looks to the ruler of Taurus for advice. And the ruler of Taurus is Venus. Taurus is a lovely sign, and Venus is the goddess of love and beauty. So where is she at? Well, she was in Pisces a little bit back last month, but she has since moved on to Aries. So she is a very enthusiastic lover these days. She can go with impetuous desire into that which she finds beautiful. And she doesn't really have to feel too awkward about it. She doesn't have to think twice before she makes a move. So I like this Venus. Another thing that's happening today, which complements this Venusian Aries theme, is that Jupiter himself is actually also entering Aries this evening, furthering this forward momentum where we don't necessarily have to review all of our actions. We might be reviewing our mental configurations, but we can still act and not have to worry all the time about how those actions are even taken. That's not to say your actions will be taken well, so you might want to think twice, but that's true anyway all the time. All right, the other thing I wanted to talk about today was that we are in eclipse season. There was a solar eclipse on April 30th. It was the same day as the Venus-Jupiter conjunction, which was a very benefic aspect. It's lucky, it's positive, it's beautiful, but since Jupiter magnifies things, it could be overindulgent. So in Pisces, which is very inward gazing, you may be overindulgent in the soul realm. For instance, delusions of grandeur. So you might want to, use that energy of Venus and Jupiter, which happened on the day of the eclipse, in a way that is hopeful, but beware of some kind of backlash, which you weren't expecting necessarily, because you might not be fully aware of all the ramifications of your mental processes. All right, so the eclipse was in Taurus. So basically, you can think of that as meaning, what do you love the most? What do you find the most beautiful? And it's a north node eclipse, so it's futuristic. So it's how do you lean into what you find most beautiful? This is definitely a good time to do that in the eclipse portal that we're in. And in what area of life this plays out depends on your rising sign. So if you were, for instance, an Aries or a Libra rising when you were born, then there's issues of money, power, respect, both for self and others, and transformation. Now these issues that I'm going to talk about right now include the whole eclipse season, which includes the lunar eclipse that's happening next Sunday night. So the eclipse season in general, has two eclipses that are in opposite houses and opposite sides of the chart. So I'm just talking generally about this whole month, essentially, and how it affects your next half of a year, since eclipse seasons come every half a year. If you are Taurus or Scorpio rising, then the eclipses are happening in your first and seventh houses, so they have to do with yourself versus others. How do you define your relationships with others? If you had Gemini or Sagittarius rising, this season will highlight your physical and mental health, and self-care will be an important topic for you. If it's Cancer and Capricorn that you had rising the moment you were born, then there are issues of fun and romance and children and creativity, and also friends and groups, like more casual friends, and hopes and wishes. And if you had Leo or Aquarius rising, then there's issues of inner versus outer life, home versus family, home and family versus career. And if you were Virgo or Pisces rising, then you can think about what is your fundamental perception of the world, which which is further clarified by this Mercury retrograde, versus some subtle philosophical realm that you live in, like the very basic perception versus the more subtle perceptions that you have. So the eclipse will be visible from almost every single person in all of America, both north and south, minus most of Alaska. And the total eclipse is visible for almost all of America as well. Here in Tennessee, it starts at around 10:30 p.m. The partial eclipse does. It doesn't go full until an hour or so later, and it will stay full for maybe an hour and a half, I think. I don't remember the exact times. But it's a long several-hour period that you can see the moon being eclipsed, from partial to full, where it turns reddish, and then back down to partial again. It's a really nice experience, and you can experience it yourself. Next Sunday night, if you haven't seen a lunar eclipse, you should definitely go outside at if you're in the Eastern time zone, 10:30 or 11 or midnight, and see the eclipse. And I recommend just staying up and watching the whole thing. You don't have to watch it every minute. You can come and go as you snack and talk to your friends, or take a picture. Take a picture of it. It's awesome. Do not be scared of the eclipse. So one thing that eclipses, when it was a solar eclipse, the sun represents your essential spirit. In a solar eclipse, that is actually blocked, but you can see, when it's a total eclipse, you can see the corona around the sun, like shining out from behind the moon, which you can never see at any other time unless it's a total solar eclipse. So while it hides your usual self, it highlights your more hidden self, which is an extremely interesting phenomenon, both visually and spiritually. When it's a lunar eclipse, so that's what's happening next Sunday. By the way, that's the night of the 15th/16th. So if Sunday doesn't make sense to you because it's at the very end of Sunday in the Eastern time zone, it'll be like around 9 p.m. in the Pacific time zone. So it's the 15th/16th. A lunar eclipse, on the other hand, the moon is your feelings, and it's how you embody the energies of the world. But when there's a lunar eclipse, the shadow of the Earth's actually covering it. So your normal personal feelings are tainted by this more overarching human world that we live in. I guess it could mean that whatever you find, however you access your mood in general, will be influenced by the state of the world. Right? That's one way to think of it. How that plays out in your life is very personal, so it's just something to reflect upon. But it's happening in Scorpio. So like the solar eclipse, you can focus on what's beautiful and what's good, and you can ask yourself, how can I bring that beauty into my life during this month? But the lunar eclipse is in Scorpio, which is about transformation. So it's a very like releasing your taboos, whatever inner taboos you have that are not allowing you to get that beauty that you're after. The lunar eclipse can help you to release them, and then you can maybe have more beauty in your life, right? And you don't have to do it the day of the eclipse, but you can kind of lean into it over the next few months. And actually, these eclipses between the houses, between the signs of Taurus and Scorpio, happen for like a year and a half. We'll have more of them later this year, so you get plenty of chances to work on these issues anyway. There is one interesting thing also about this lunar eclipse, is that it's trining Neptune. And Neptune is compassion, but it's also dreams, it's visionary. It's in its home of Pisces, so Neptune is feeling pretty happy right now, and it's been so for quite a while, for many years. So the moon and Neptune have an interesting synergy, because while the moon is coalescing and collecting, and Neptune, I feel like he does have some of that kind of thing going on, but he's also considered dispersive and foggy. So in one sense, when you're in the fog, everything coalesces into this one state of like whiteness. But on the other hand, you can't really see what's happening. So your normal ability to differentiate one thing from another is dispersed. Okay, so basically, since the moon is trining Neptune, and the Neptune was just met up with Jupiter not that long ago, but Jupiter since will have moved into Aries as of today, then that energy that Jupiter and Neptune held together, which was, big dreams or something like that, that has dispersed itself into separate categories. Neptune's still in Pisces, feeling dreamy, but Jupiter now in Aries will be very proactive and very external. So this eclipse, being a transformational type of eclipse, can help you, since it's loosely trining Jupiter as well as Neptune, to manifest these inner changes that you want to make into your Taurus new moon intention. Remember, the solar eclipse on April 30th was a new moon. But a new moon eclipse is a very dramatic new moon. So whatever intentions you make will have a greater effect, basically. So that's all I want to talk about now. I guess we could just briefly mention that Ceres is going into Cancer this month, and that is a very natural place for Ceres to be, because Ceres is a nurturing asteroid, and Cancer is also a nurturing sign. So I think we can always, thank Ceres for supporting our nurturing side as we go for that which is lovely and leave behind our inner taboos, which are preventing us from getting that. Thanks for watching.